Hello and welcome back to part 2 of my 3-part series looking at athletic development in secondary schools. For those that are tuning in for the first time, my name is Jack. I'm a strength and conditioning coach based out of Bristol and the Southwest. Again, for those that missed part 1, I'm just going to do a quick review. So firstly, we looked at some of the early obstacles that teachers and sports coaches are potentially faced with when integrating a resistance training curriculum into their academic program. Secondly, we highlighted some of the recent literature that positively promotes the inclusion of a resistance training program into a young performers weekly routine. And finally, we looked at some of the real-life success stories of secondary schools that have integrated a resistance training curriculum both across the country and the globe. Part 2 will see us dip into 2 key areas. Firstly, we will briefly look at some of the holistic short and long-term outcome goals as a result of committing to a resistance training curriculum. Secondly, we will venture into what impact maturity has in relation to sport and exercise and what factors are worth considering around this. So before we explore these outcomes, we have to remember that this resistance training curriculum is not solely a here and now educational program. As staff and coaches, we have to appreciate a student's exercise background in order to better support their exercise development throughout secondary school. With the proper instruction and values installed via this program, we can set these students up for years to come. Ultimately, we want positive, active lifestyles with all of our students, and we have a huge opportunity and responsibility during their secondary school years to ingrain these educated habits. So what are our short-term outcomes? What are our here and nows? So firstly, we want to install self-confidence. We want to promote student-to-student engagement. And finally, relating to the resistance training curriculum, we want technical mastery. In terms of the long-term outcomes, so that's way beyond secondary school years, we want exercise education, we want exercise variety, and finally we want long-term engagement. So the topic of maturity is a huge area, with plenty of research that is still growing to help our understanding. What I'm keen to explore is what maturity is, how we can track it, and how we can respond to it. Again, plenty of depth, even what I'm going to divulge, so where suggested or reference, I recommend further reading to inform yourselves in your own time. So the onset of maturity is a period of physical growth in both stature and weight, or peak height velocity and peak weight velocity respectively. But it is peak height velocity which we want to concentrate on. During this period, as we have defined, there is an accelerated rate of growth in stature. Limbs start to increase in length, joints start to reconfigure, and muscle starts to develop, and therefore improvements in strength and power. Just a quick note on peak weight velocity. It roughly occurs 6 to 12 months after peak height velocity due to the accruement in lean mass being at its greatest. For more detail on peak weight velocity, check out this year's narrative review, Free Weight Resistance Training in Youth Athletes. What we have to be wary of is these changes in stature and mass are more often than not occurring early on in a student's time at secondary school. So we have to be careful how we program and appreciate that due to changes occurring to the body, alignment to progression and the resistance training program during this period is not always linear. For example, what once was a well-trained squat or hinge pattern may now see stalled progression or even regression. Now, I'm not suggesting that we pump the brakes on and stop doing any activity, but merely back off on the intensity and volume. We'll get to a little bit more of this in part 3. Just a personal note from my experience, if you do experience that a child is frustrated because they are struggling with a skill that they once owned as a result of this at maturity, be patient with them, show understanding, and educate the parents of what is happening so they can help keep steering in the right direction. Finally, we have to appreciate that the timing and tempo of growth is different from one child to the next. So the chronological age means very little when suggesting windows of opportunity or trainability, i.e. resistance training, power and speed. I suggest reading Lloyd and Oliver's 2012 paper on youth physical development, a new approach to long-term athletic development, detailing an evidence-based approach to the systematic development of physical performance in youth athletes. This paper provides a real appreciation for varying rates and timing of physical change. Ultimately, if a kid is ready and can do it with solid form, don't limit them by their actual age. So in this slide, the infographic reviewed literature on the influence of growth and maturation on stretch shortening cycle function in youth athletes. So I just wanted to add this slide in to appreciate end-stage adapted mechanisms that support a young performer during exercise or sporting activities. For those that are not sure, the stretch shortening cycle is a naturally occurring sequence of events within a muscle or a group of muscles that consist of an eccentric, so lengthening fashion, and a concentric, shortening fashion muscle action, whereby the stored elastic energy of the eccentric action enhances the concentric action. So during a game or regular exercise situation, this mechanism occurs regularly in response to an external stimulus, which the body has to overcome in order to complete a successful action. As a result of growth and maturation, the structural and neuromuscular adaptations below result in the enhanced mechanical outcomes, both force output and rate of force development, so producing more strength and power at a faster rate. So how do we monitor to plan for forthcoming changes? There are a few assessment types, but a method with no additional cost, easy to administer, that is non-invasive is the calculation of the maturity offset value, allowing us to predict what age a student will achieve peak height velocity. So if you check out the model here, which shows us what values we require to calculate the offset, we're looking at things like body mass, we want standing height, seated height, and we want chronological age, and these values will give us a maturity offset. Kit that we require is a stadiometer, weighing scales, and a gender-specific equation ready on your desktop or laptop. If you guys require this template of both the male and female equations, please drop me an email. I'm happy to ping them across to you. Regarding the procedure, so you start off by asking the student to remove shoes and watches, etc., anything that can create inaccurate measures. Note their gender and date of birth down, then take their weight in kilograms on the scales, take their standing height via the stadio, then their seated height. So ask them to sit down on the stadio, legs straight, spine straight up against the stadio. Once all of this is inputted into the equation, you will get a maturity offset, which you simply retract or add to their chronological age, thus giving you their biological age and predicted time to or past peak height velocity. From here, you can adjust and manage their program effectively so it's aligned with any changes occurring. Final note with this assessment is we have to appreciate that a one-time assessment is only a snapshot of their maturity of there and then. We therefore have to regularly assess this and keep a record to acknowledge trends and identify rates of physical change and the timing of change. Realistically, in an academic year, I would look to assess 3 times per year, once in September, once post-Christmas, early January, and one final time end of March or early April, just before the Easter break. Thank you for tuning into part 2 of this presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it informative. If you wish to follow my posts and some of the work I'm doing relating to this on social media, please check out my links below. If you wish to chat further about this section that I've just detailed, please contact me via the email jackdaviessc@gmail.com. I will look to post my final presentation in the next few days, but until then, take care and thank you very much.